Hello, my name is David Parkhurst. I'm a senior support TAM and a client management subject matter enthusiast here at Tanium. I've been here with Tanium a little over 2 years now, and I've gone through quite a bit and learned a lot about managing clients. Also here with David Tupper, fellow support TAM, and today's moderator to help answer questions as we go through today's presentation. Just want to quickly take you through the agenda for what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to go over identifying issues and collecting artifacts, client installation and registration, endpoint configuration and module tools, and leveling up your search. And got a couple pro tips for helping you find the information you need. Now we have a few slides, but for the most part, I'm just going to be navigating around the console and showing you things and talking through them. Now, a couple of things. When it comes to maintaining the client or health of the Tanium platform, there are a lot of things to look at and consider. We want to be as proactive as possible, and we recommend establishing a regular cadence to review the status of the Tanium client installations, module tools, and extensions and configurations. And we want to make sure that the Tanium client is staying up to date. We want to make sure that tools are being updated to the appropriate versions. We want to make sure our tools are running before we need to use them. At a minimum, you should probably review the status of Tanium monthly, so put it on your calendar so you don't forget. It's important to incorporate the necessary health checks so they fit into your operational workflow. For example, if you patch every patch Tuesday, we should probably be checking the health of our patch tooling the Tuesday before that. Now, being proactive. We have saved questions that we can use. We can use saved questions. We can create new ones that ask general health check questions. We can customize our console homepage. We can customize the module overview pages to bring the module health to the top. We can customize single endpoint view to have it show relevant sensors and give us information about that endpoint. And we can also build reports and dashboards based off of this information. Really, the best thing to do is use the Tanium platform, well, the way we use the Tanium platform to do anything else, and query that information from the endpoints. So I'm just going to navigate over to the console real quick and show you a few of these things. Um, I'll start with some of the saved questions we have. So I'm just going to go over to Interact. And we have a dashboard. Tanium administration. I'm just going to select this, and we have a dashboard here called Client Core Health. And you see I've already favorited it, but I select it and it gives us a few saved questions that we can use to get some health information from our endpoints. I'm just going to favorite this one right here and maybe Tanium client logging levels and this guy. And I'm going to go back to my console overview page and I want to customize this a little bit. So this information is up front for me when I log into the console. So I'm just going to customize the page here and I am going to put my favorite interact save questions there and save. And now we have that there and I can just click on here and I want to check for Tanium client errors. We're just going to ask this question and looks like we have one error. Now I want to go probably look at this endpoint and figure out what's going on with this registry key. It's probably causing issues running some Tanium client tools. Just a quick example. We probably also want to customize our module health pages or overview pages. So I'm going to, just a quick example, go to patch. And I'm just going to customize this page. And we see we have the health check information down here. I'm just going to bring that to the top. And that way, every time I go and look at patch, I can see what endpoints are good to go, what endpoints need attention, and so forth. Um, we also have a handy question I like to use for health checking. We tend to call this the magic question because it asks sensors in various ways and gives us a lot of information about what might be going on in an endpoint. This is a good example for something you can use as a saved question. I'm just going to put it in here and then I'll talk about what these do. I'm just going to ask the question. There we go. So we're asking computer name, Tanium client core health, CPU architecture, CPU family, and PowerShell version. So with a computer name sensor, Um, if we see like TSC errors here, it indicates a problem with the client's ability to query reserved sensors, which give us very important information about the endpoint to help us, for example, target tooling. Um, if we have errors there, then we're probably going to have issues installing tooling. Tanium client core health, it basically determines whether the Tanium client is able to execute our default content successfully. It will return any error conditions. For example, if we have a problem, we actually had a good example earlier. Let's see. Think if I do, yep. So this is the Tanium client core health question, and we see we have an issue on this endpoint. This is actually my lab endpoint, and I broke it on purpose. We also have the CPR architecture. Um, we have if we have TSC errors there, it can indicate an issue with running WIMI queries on the endpoint. CPU family. TSC errors indicate a problem with the Tanium's ability to call VBS scripts with C script that run WIMI queries. And we also have the PowerShell version here. Errors here indicate an issue with Tanium's ability to call C script to run VBS script to query the registry. We also have several other sensors that we can use. I'm just going to transition over to my slide. We have things like Tanium client downloads directory details, folder size. We can look at client settings, upgrade status. We can check our logging level and server name list and so forth. All good things to check if you're trying to get a status of your environment. Now we're going to go ahead and take a look at client health. And I'm just going to navigate to my console again. Now this is definitely something that you want to check regularly. I have a quick link here just so I can easily get to it, but you can also navigate the shared services, client management, and then click client health over here. And this will give us a nice overview of what we have in our environment, such as our deployed client versions, what health failures we have going on with different tooling, our OS platforms we've deployed to, the client extensions versions, and our Python runtimes. We can also narrow this down to a specific computer group, so we can really hone in on the endpoints we're most interested in. So for example, I'll just look at my endpoints. And luckily we don't have any health failures with extensions, but I can see the information that I have on these endpoints here. And I'm just going to quickly change this back to all computers. We can also click over here on the settings and review all the custom settings we have in our endpoints. Now, this is a good thing to check. There's a few things we probably want to keep an eye on, like the action lock flag. If we have the action lock flag enabled on our endpoints, that means they are not able to run any actions, including manifest updates. So they're not able to get updated configuration items from the Tanium server. You definitely want to review to make sure that you don't have this set inappropriately and change it if you do. We also probably want to look at our client cache. We want to make sure this is set to an appropriate level so that our endpoints aren't downloading more data from the Tanium server than they really need to. If they can store more information, they can share more information with other endpoints in the linear chain. We can also look at disabled extensions. For example, we have some endpoints that have comply disabled. So they're not going to be able to run our comply assessments. We might want to look at that and make sure that they are supposed to have it disabled. And if not, probably enable it. We also want to take a look at our log verbosity levels. So for the most part, this should probably be set to 1. That is our default for log verbosity. If you see any here that are 0 and you don't have a good reason for it, you should probably turn that on, or else it'll make it very difficult to actually troubleshoot issues when issues arise with the Tanium client. Um, Now, we have various logging levels, and I'm just going to talk about those real quick. All right. So we have two main settings for controlling log verbosity. There's a log verbosity level, which controls the logging level for the log0 log file. We have the logs extensions log verbosity level, which controls the logging level for the extensions 0 log file, which is where you'll see information from all your toolings like performance, index, software manager, and so forth. Now we have various logging levels. 0, as I said, is disabled. We have 1, which will be critical and errors. 11, which is warning. 21, to provide info, 41 is debug, and 91 is trace. Now, if you set something to 91, then that will also include all of the logging levels before it. Let me just get some water. I'm going to transition back over to the console. Now, the real meat and potatoes here with client health is going to be our ability to direct connect to an endpoint and take a look at them. So I'm going to go ahead and connect to one of my endpoints. And there we go. So this is, we're looking at a specific endpoint. We can see client extensions and settings and what configs it has deployed, how many times it's registered, when it was first installed, computer ID, and all kinds of good information. We can transition over to the configuration tab, and we can see specific settings that are set. I've disabled reveal on this endpoint. Maybe I did that on accident. I want to go reverse that. And we can see that I have my log verbosity actually set to 0 for extensions and my regular logging. But I also have the extensions logging for comply set to 91 in case I wanted to troubleshoot an issue with comply. You can also go over here and look at logs. We can load up pretty much any of the log files here. For example, if I'm having issues running actions, I want to go ahead and check action history. I can find an action I had an issue with, get that action ID, figure out what it was, and then I can actually transition right over to actions, and I can load up that specific action. I'm going to go ahead and do the direct connect one, and I can see what happened when this action ran. Now, the best part is the gather tab. If you're reporting a problem, 99% of the time, we're probably going to ask you to produce an endpoint must gather or an EMG. Now, typically, at a minimum, I request the config and the core domains, because this gives us a lot of useful information on the endpoint that we can use to diagnose a lot of issues. Now, if we're troubleshooting a specific issue, we're probably going to ask you to select a specific domain. For example, if our endpoints are having issues with patching, we're probably going to have you select Software Manager, and you can select everything here, or we can specifically select patch logs and Tanium scan logs and include those in our gather. So I am just going to verify. So I have my config and core. If we suspect performance issues, we'll probably also ask you to include the TSDB. This TSDB gives us a lot of insight into what the Tanium client processes are doing and what resources they're using. I'm not going to collect that today because it does take a little bit longer. So I'm just going to go ahead and click gather from endpoint. And give this a moment to generate. And it's finished. And I'll just click download. And then I would download a neat little bundle that I can upload to my support case. All right. So that's all fine and dandy if our Tanium client is healthy and reporting to the Tanium console. But what if it isn't? So for example, I'm going to go back to client health, and I am going to try to connect to one of my other endpoints, and it's not going to work. So it's getting the package, which triggers the endpoint to try to initiate the direct connection, but it's not going to be able to. So now I can't look at handy logs. So I'm going to have to look at that endpoint itself. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now we have the ability to still run must gathers manually. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that. I'm going to open up a PowerShell window, run as administrator. And I'm actually going to do it on this endpoint. And I'm going to CD to the Tanium client directory. And we're going to call the Tanium CX. And we're going to do call support dot start mg. Now we have a little ID here. It tells us that the must gather is running. We're going to go ahead and check the status. So we're going to modify our command here to support dot get dash mg list. And we'll see the information about the current must gather. Now you can add additional parameters to this command to select the individual domains or components that you're actually interested in. Since I didn't enter anything in, it's just going to generate a full must gather. Um, similar to when we direct connect in the console when we're selecting individual domains. And then when it's done, it'll output to client extensions, Tanium client extensions core, and the temp directory. And I'll just go to that directory real quick. I'm going to go back, Tanium client, extensions, core, temp, and we see our must gather here that we can pull off the endpoint. All right. All right. So controlling those logging settings. There's a few different ways we can do that. We can use Tanium client management, configuration management, and settings configurations. We also have packages that allow you to modify Tanium client settings. I'm just going to go to the home page there. And I'm going to demonstrate those real quick. So I'm going to go back to client management. Configuration management, settings configurations. Also, we have a bunch of settings configurations that are applied in order of the priority and based off of computer group targeting. I have a setting here. We saw the logging was disabled. It's disabled because I have this profile disabling it. So we can create a new profile that takes priority over this one. So I can fix the logging level. Whoops. Create a settings configuration. I'm just going to reset them to their defaults. And I'm going to target my endpoints. Oh, whoops, actually, I made a mistake. I actually just have to modify this one. You can't target the same computer group. Let me just modify this one. Click into that. I'm going to edit it. There we go. So I can't actually target the same computer group with another profile, but I'm going to set the logging level to 1, which is the default for log 0, and 11, which is the default for extensions, and I'm going to click save. And there we go. Now I need to deploy it because I made changes. And now that logging level will be updated on those endpoints. We also have the ability to use a package. So I'm just going to go to the single endpoint view for one of my endpoints to deploy a package. Here we go. And I'm just going to deploy an action. And it's going to be the modify Tanium client setting package. Selecting the appropriate one for Windows. The reg type will be dword, and our client setting name will be log verbosity level. And then this is where we specify the level. And I'm just going to go ahead and change it to 11. I'm going to increase it from 1 to 11 to get a little more information. And we just show preview continue and deploy the action. I'm not going to actually do that. And then we also, again, what if we don't have the ability to connect to the endpoint? We need these logs to dive deeper into troubleshooting an issue. We can also modify this from the command line. Really on Windows, this is just a setting that's stored in the registry. So it's really simple. We just call the Tanium client exe and config set log verbosity level and then we would set it here with 11. Now we can list all the configs we have with config list. Now, if I don't specify anything, it'll just spit out all of the client settings we have. But in this case, I'm just going to specify the specific setting I want to look at. And we see that our log verbosity level is 11. All right. Now let's talk about installation and registration. Now, arguably one of the most important things we can do is make sure that the Tanium client is installed everywhere it should be and that the installation is healthy. In some cases, users with local admin rights might be able to uninstall the Tanium client or stop the Tanium client service or tamper with Tanium client files. Um, Now, a good way to, we definitely recommend regularly auditing this. If you have Tanium Discover, you can audit the endpoints which you have deployed the Tanium client and look for lost interfaces or previously managed interfaces. And go in there. You can actually integrate this with client management to maybe automatically redeploy the client if there are issues. Speaking of uh, users messing with the Tanium client, we have the ability to harden Tanium clients. We have content that'll apply various packages that'll apply client service hardening. I'm going to go show you what that looks like real quick. And we actually have another dashboard and interact that we can use to quickly check the status of hardening and target our endpoints to deploy our packages. So I'm just going to look at this guy. And I want to take a look at our Tanium client service control permissions. So I can see the status of the hardening. So it's set to default. Maybe I don't want it to be default so people can't mess with it. So I'm going to deploy an action to these endpoints. And there we go. It already has, and it already gives us the packages we can run for this saved question. Because we've associated them with this saved question. Now we can maybe make it so only local system can control the service, so even admins can't mess with it. And then you would just deploy this package and it'll apply those and make it harder to mess with the Tanium client. We also want to make sure that we're getting our clients upgraded. We have a neat tuning Tanium session for covering Tanium Client Management 2.0. I definitely recommend checking that out and following the best practices for upgrading your clients and making sure they're up to date because basically each client upgrade will have various improvements and bug fixes that we want to apply. And if you're having an issue, maybe upgrading the client might solve that issue already. All right, let's talk about registration. Registration is a core component to Tanium client functionality. When first deployed, the Tanium client connects to Tanium. It initiates a registration to get a unique ID, that computer ID, the latest client settings, nearby peers list, and definitions for sensors, questions, and actions. It also undergoes a normal registration at randomized intervals of 30 to 90 seconds. It reports its status and it receives new questions, actions, or settings. And then the initial registration resets at random intervals, so it repeats the whole process and actually restarts the Tanium client. This happens every 2 to 6 hours. This ensures that it applies the latest updates and optimizes peer selection. Okay, so what if we install the Tanium client, everything looks fine, but it's not answering questions and I can't direct connect to it. So let's go ahead and check the status of our Tanium deployment. Now, we have a few ways to do this. One of the simplest ways is asking a question. So I'm just going to grab my question very quickly. And we're just going to query some basic information from our endpoints. We're getting computer name, operating system, client version, and the Tanium server name from all machines. Now I'm going to ask this question and I'm going to quickly check to see if a Tanium client is deployed to the endpoint that I recently installed it on or attempted to install it on. Just give this a second to load, and I'm just going to look for one of my lab endpoints. And I can see that it's here answering questions, see the Tanium server name, and it is installed. We can also, okay, so what if it doesn't show up here? Then we probably want to go ahead and check client status to see if it ever registered. So we'll go to administration, configuration, client status, and we see the status of all the clients in our environment, and we have various options to filter here. Um, let's say this guy was installed, I don't know, yesterday, but I'm still not seeing it in here. Maybe it checked in or maybe something happened. I'm just going to go ahead and change this to look at clients that have registered in the last day, and then I'm going to sort this to see which clients haven't registered today, basically. And then I can go in here and look at these and be like, oh, they are online. They should be checking in. What's going on? I'm going to go troubleshoot these endpoints. We also have the ability to, if we're using client management, we can go to client management and check the status of our deployments and actually look at the install logs. So we're going to go look at our client deployments here. This is just test deployment. It's not really doing anything, but we load up that deployment and we see our endpoint details here. We can expand this and then we can see everything that happened when it tried to install that. Now this log also exists on an endpoint if you're installing it. I'll just show you that real quick. We'll go to the Tanium client directory and we see the install log here. And I'll just open it up and we can see everything that happened. And if we have an issue, we can check this to see what errors might have occurred. We can also increase the log verbosity for the install log too if we're having repeated issues, the same way we increase the log verbosity for anything else. Okay, let me go back to my slides. All right. When installing Tanium client, whoops. And we're having issues, we definitely want to verify that our AV exclusions are in place. If they're not implemented properly, not only will it cause probably severe performance issues on your endpoint, but it'll hamper the functionality of the Tanium client. We are a script-heavy platform with our sensors and packages, and AV inspecting and stopping those actions from running will cause issues all over the place. We have various resources that we provide to help you get those applied in whatever, in most of the AV products, common AV products out there. I recommend you go and you can find these on the Tanium Resource Center. And we provide handy guides and more explanation and in-depth explanation about how it works and why it's beneficial. All right. Now, if we're having an issue with registration, there's a few basic things we want to do. And the more of this kind of troubleshooting that you do, it can eliminate a lot of variables and possibilities when we're maybe submitting a case to support to help figure out what's going on. We definitely want to test basic connectivity from the endpoint. We want to test and make sure name resolution is working. We want to validate our local and network firewall rules, and we want to verify that SSL inspection is not occurring, as the Tanium client traffic to the Tanium server is very sensitive to that SSL inspection, and it'll break or prevent that SSL handshake from occurring. Now you can easily pop open the log0 file and it'll give you a lot of indicators if you have any of these issues. You'll see SSL handshakes failing. You'll see connections being refused. You'll see that it's unable to resolve the Tanium server name, or you'll just, if connections being refused, we might want to look at network firewall rules. Give my slide a second. Okay. All right, let's talk about endpoint configuration and module tools. So endpoint configuration, it delivers client extensions, tools, and configuration information to endpoints consistently for all Tanium solutions that are available in an environment. Um, Now, when it comes to ensuring tools and configurations are delivered to the endpoints, there are a few things we want to keep an eye on. And those are the action groups to make sure that our tools are correctly targeted to the endpoints. We want to make sure that our endpoints are receiving the latest manifest, which tells them what tools they're targeted for and what configurations they're supposed to have. And we also want to review our ECF audit logs to make sure that those manifest actions are being generated and deployed. So let's take a look at what that looks like real quick. Go back to our Tanium console, and we're going to go to shared services and endpoint configuration. And we get a short little summary page. It tells us all the tools we have installed, what our active configurations are, and what our current manifest revision is. And I'm actually going to look at our action groups real quick. Now, let's say I have an issue where an endpoint isn't running comply assessments. Very basic check. I just want to make sure that it's actually being targeted for the comply tools. So I can see we have a default action group for Tanium comply, and I can quickly check what computers it's targeting. And it's all computers, so my endpoint should definitely be included. Now we can look in here to quickly identify if we have any issues with our tools. But first, let's say let's go ahead and check if to make sure our endpoints are getting the latest manifest revision. So we have 86488 there. I'm just going to ask a quick question, and we're going to get the endpoint configuration manifest metadata from all machines. Now this will tell us the current manifest revision on all of our endpoints. Now, if we have a problem with no manifest found, that's a serious issue. We need to investigate those endpoints. Or if they're on a severely outdated manifest, we got to make sure we get that updated, or else our endpoints are not getting the latest configurations. Um, and we can see that for the most part, our endpoints are on the latest, so that's good. And if it's one or two behind, that's usually okay. It's just a delay between running the scheduled action, downloading the package to update the manifest, and so forth. As long as it's relatively close, we're probably okay. And we can also check our audit logs just to see and make sure that our manifest is being created and updated and deployed. And we can see our endpoint config here. It's created at 9:19, and then it was deployed at 9:20. And now this will get recreated every time a module has a configuration change that it needs to deploy to the endpoints. And it'll actually create a scheduled action that runs and deploys that. All right, so what about configurations? We can get a quick overview of all the configurations we're deploying from each of our modules here. Now, of course, you can go and check the individual modules and look at what you're deploying. I'm going to give this a second to load. Let me just close some tabs. I'm going to refresh. All right, there. Oh, whoops. My internet might be having issues. Well, um, in the interest of time, okay, let's wait. Okay, there we go. Anyway, I want to quickly check on my patch configuration. So I'm going to filter by the patch domain. There we go, and we see it's getting all of our patch configurations, and I want to make sure a maintenance window is being applied. So I'm just going to search by maintenance windows, and I'm going to look at one that maybe I created recently, and it looks like this is the latest one. I can expand that, take a look, and I can see what the targeting is to make sure it's being deployed to the correct endpoints and verify if my endpoint matches that targeting. Then we also have a nice overview page of all of our tools. And this will give us a quick status of basically all the tools in our environment, their installation state, if there are any errors, if any are on different versions, and so forth. I am just going to take a look at one that might have issues. Yeah, and let's take a look at patch. And we can see all the different versions we have out in our environment. So we probably want to go investigate these. We can click on any one of these buttons to drill down and interact and find out more information from those endpoints. Um, and if we're on a previous version, we probably want to make sure that we get that updated. We can see all the errors. We can see if we have patch blocked on any endpoints or if it's unsupported or if an endpoint is no longer targeted and the tooling can be removed for whatever reason. I'm just going to go ahead and drill down on one of these. Now, we provide various packages to help manage the tools. So we see that some of these they're trying to upgrade, but they're running into some errors. There's some download issues, there's some post-install command issues. Now, let's say I just want to troubleshoot this. I'm going to target this endpoint. It looks like we have 4 endpoints in this case, and I just want to deploy an action. And I'm just going to have it uninstall and do a fresh install. So we have endpoint configuration packages to do uninstalls. I'm just going to do uninstall tool. I'm going to specify patch. And then I don't want to block reinstallation, but I can if I want to. I'm going to uncheck soft uninstall, and I'm going to remove unreferenced dependencies. So it can install and give patch a chance to instead of doing an upgrade, install the latest version. I'm not actually going to deploy this, but it's that simple. We can also specify all module tools if we wanted to reinstall everything, but you probably don't want to do that most of the time. We also have the ability to reinstall tools, which might be preferable. Same concept here. Specify the tool you want to reinstall. And we can also, if we're doing a reinstall, unblock the tool. If we want to if for whatever reason we don't want certain tools to be installed on our endpoints, we can actually block them like this. Oops. We have packages to block the tools. And again, specify the tool name, or you could block all module tools. We also have the ability to disable client extensions. If, for example, we have an issue with a certain client extension that's causing a problem on our endpoint, maybe we want to disable it until we figure out what's going on. Now, this package will disable all client extensions, but we can disable individual client extensions by using the modified Tanium client setting package. And it'll be Windows. And this will be, for example, if I want to disable comply, because I just don't want it running assessments while I figure out what a problem is. And then we can just set this to 1, and I'll deploy that. And that will disable the comply extension. Now, when you make setting changes to extensions, you also have to restart client extensions, which we provide a package for. And let me just type in restart. Now you can just wait for the normal reset interval that we talked about earlier, but it's probably quicker to just go ahead and deploy this package. Now I wanted to show you real quick a handy question we can use to troubleshoot client extensions errors. Now we looked at client management earlier, client health, and this gives us a good indication of extensions errors as well. But as part of our regular health check questions, we can make a saved question that uses this information too. So we see health failures in our environment for the different extensions, and we have an example of index here. So we probably want to drill down and troubleshoot these endpoints to see what's going on with that subscription with Integrity Monitor and maybe tune index so we're not getting scans that take longer than they're supposed to. You can quickly scroll through here and we have health check information for various modules. Definitely want to go in here and regularly check this and resolve any health check errors that we see. I'm just going to ask a quick question that I like to use to give an idea of what's going on in my environment. Now, this is very similar to the magic question we used before, but I'm just adding a couple things. And there we go. So we got that same health check information, and then it also will pull back any of the health check related errors for those endpoints as well. And then if we have no results, that's good. That means we don't have any health check errors. So I'm using the client extension status, and then I'm filtering for the key that contains health check just to pull back that specific information. And for the most part, endpoints that have those errors. And then I can easily go in here and identify what errors we're having, and I can start my investigation and figure out what's going on. So for example, we see comply over here is crashing frequently. Probably want to go in there and collect some logs, generate an EMG, and see what's going on. Now, last thing I want to leave you with, it's our ability to query the Tanium Resource Center quickly. So when we're running into issues, we can identify the resources we need. We have various documents for each of our modules. We have troubleshooting pages that you can use. We have a resource here. I've linked each of our solutions has a troubleshooting page that you can click on, and it'll give you a good idea of where to start, what to look for, what artifacts to gather. And then, so the more information you provide here, the faster we can get to a resolution. Now, I just wanted to, whoops, sorry. I just wanted to show you a quick pro tip for searching our documentation. I'm going to switch over here. Now, this is an example with Edge, but it can also be done with Chrome, and we'll have instructions provided in our article to help you do this. But just a quick example, I'm going to go to my settings and privacy, search and services. And I'm going to scroll down here to address bar and search. And I'm going to go to manage search engines. And now you can do this as a lot of different things, not just Tanium. So maybe this will help you out in other ways too. But for example, I have the Tanium Resource Center here. I'm just going to go ahead and click Edit. Now you can do this too. I just call it Tanium Resource Center, and I specify a shortcut, and then I have a URL for it to search. Now, I'll just save this, and then when I want to search the Tanium Resource Center, let me do that again in case you missed it, TRC, and then tab, and then I can look for whatever I want. Let's say I need to collect the must gather and I don't remember all the steps to do that. I'm just going to go to our client management user guide, and I'm going to go to troubleshooting, and I can see various tips for troubleshooting and how to connect and collect logs from endpoints. So for an endpoint must gather, I can see collect troubleshooting information from endpoints, and it'll walk me through exactly how to do that.
First question was from Chris Turner. This one had an amended answer. It's regarding client management and deploying the client via satellite. So that should be available now in TCM 2.1. If you're a cloud customer, you should be seeing that in your environment already. If you're on-prem, you'll just need to upgrade to TCM 2.1. Second question is Is there a curated list of TSC errors and recommended resolutions when they are detected? We don't currently have a publicly facing document that describes this. We do have a troubleshooting methodology that we recommend for you when you're encountering a TSC error, but generally the messages themselves are pretty informative as far as why the error is occurring. Just from I guess for additional context on that one, TSE stands for Tanium Scan Engine. Tanium Sensor Engine, excuse me. Um, it's the execution of sensors if something is going wrong over the course of that. Common things that I see is WMI is not configured correctly on the endpoint, or potentially there's another process on the endpoint that's blocking the execution of sensors. So those are a good few things to look at first. A question also came in asking about if you can collect EMGs from multiple endpoints at once. This is something that I definitely would like to see, but we don't currently have in the platform. You have to currently collect EMGs manually and from each endpoint individually. But if this is something that you would like to see, we generally tend to dedicate our product and development resources based on how many customers are requesting something and what the value that it could potentially drive is. So if that's something you're looking for, I'd always recommend putting in a ticket. Next question would be, is there a list of EMG domains and the associated module and feature? There isn't, but as I explained in the answer in chat, they're mostly self-explanatory. Complies for comply, discovers for discover. The biggest exceptions to that will be the software manager domain, which covers both patch and deploy. So for most of you, that's going to be a pretty relevant one. The core domain is all the Tanium client core logs, your log zeros, your extension zero log, your CX tool history, all of those, as well as the action logs get pulled with the core domain. The config is mostly for the tools installation status on your endpoint. So what tools are installed, what's their statuses on the endpoint. And this last point is one that's close to my heart. We generally recommend gathering a full EMG if possible. And the reason for that is I've had it be the case more than a few times where an EMG is sent to me, but I'm curious for something else. So if you have a comply issue, for instance, and you just send over the comply logs, there are logs in, say, the core config, the TSDB domains that would be useful for the support engineer to have. So if possible, and if your environment allows for it, then we recommend uploading the full EMG to the Tanium Resource Center, which has a 2 GB limit. So generally, that's going to be pretty substantial and large enough to be able to accommodate most EMGs. With regards to how do we gather a must gather from a Linux endpoint? The methodology will be the same if you're gathering through the console. So if you're going to do that, then it's the same thing. You go to client management and from there to client health, and then you can just collect the EMG, hopefully the full EMG as we just covered earlier. If you cannot direct connect to the endpoint, though, you can always try the alternative method. Generally, if you can't connect to it via direct connect, there are likely some health issues, which obviously is the topic of this conversation and this presentation, but that is something to be aware of if you're trying to opt for the local method. One small thing and kind of caveat to note there as well, if the Tanium cx.exe or the Tanium cx binary, if it's Linux, is not present, you won't be able to collect the EMG locally, but if that's the issue, then you're probably not going to have anything working with your Tanium client anyway. Nikita answered, can we get a recording for this webinar? It should be available by Friday, and that's going to be posted again through the Tanium Resource Center. And then David, do you want to cover that next question regarding automated remediation of broken Tanium clients?
1 second, I was just answering another question. Where is that? Sorry, which one is that?
Yeah, it's 922.
922. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, Yeah, for deploying the Tanium client or redeploying the Tanium client if we find that it's broken, and to automate it, basically we want to use Tanium client management to do that. We have another great tuning Tanium session covering using Tanium client management 2.0 to do this. Um, so I've referenced the article there. You can go check that out or search it on the Tanium Resource Center. We also recommend checking out our client management user guide, which will go into all the juicy details of how to use client management to deploy the Tanium client.
Awesome. Okay, and then kind of moving down the list there. Um, Questions for client core health. Are there associated modules that tie to the core health findings? It won't give you specific modules or tools. It'll give you information about the Tanium client's ability to run core content, say like install tools or initiate a direct connection. So there isn't necessarily a one-to-one, but generally what I've found is that the descriptions are informative enough to kind of start pointing you in the right direction. That being said, as well, we do on the support side appreciate when customers try to proactively troubleshoot their issues. But if at whatever point, say you ask the Tanium client core health question and aren't able to come up with a satisfactory answer as to why that is the case, submitting a ticket with that as a starting point would often be a good enough thing to point us in the right direction and help you from the support side. Let's
All
see.
right.
Oh,
Are there any
yeah.
more questions, David, or?
We're working through them. Let's see
Yeah,
All right.
here.
there's one more I think we have to
Sure.
answer. Is there any specific sensor to retrieve the index database size in Tanium? Any specific ways for IndexedDB to restrict its size? I believe we have a sensor for that. It should be index database size. You can ask that question of your endpoints and it should give you the size of the database. And there should be a client extension setting that you can deploy to the endpoints to basically tell it, what size the database is allowed to be. And it might actually be in client management when we're deploying our index configuration. Let me just check on that real quick, actually. Because we do have index configurations and configuration management. If I create an index configuration, yes, if you go to manage your index configuration and client management, you actually have the ability to set the max index database size there. And then you can deploy that to all your endpoints.